Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the STUMPCAST. I am Mr. Tree Stump, your host. You can call me Stump, Mr. Stump, anything you want, just don't call me late for dinner. There is absolutely no structure to what I am doing right now. This is something that's been on my mind for a long time. I've always had a dream about doing a podcast long before podcasting was as relevant and as predominant as it is today and as relevant. Um, So here we are. It is currently June 20th of 2025. Um, I'm finally sitting down to do this. Like I said, it's been a dream of mine for a long time to sit down and do a podcast. There was work plans in the work, um, a while back for me to maybe do a duo podcast with somebody else. A couple of different things, which may still happen in the future, but more or less, I decided to just go ahead and dive into it myself. So here we are. So this is the Stumpcast, like I said in the beginning. So a little bit about me. I will be 28 in a couple of weeks. I am a single father, proud father at that. I'm just a regular blue collar guy. Right now I don't really have a whole lot going on. I'm getting ready to start a new job here. I've been a mechanic both personally and professionally for the better part of about 12 years. Um, Not a whole lot of that has been consistent. Uh Consistency's not really been a good thing for me. But I've worked on everything. I've worked on cars, I've worked on trucks, construction equipment, landscaping equipment, uh semis, you name it, I've worked on it. RVs, uh tanker trucks, I mean you name it, I've worked on it in some capacity. Um I've got a little bit of a knack for that. Um My I won't talk about my daughter a whole lot, but I will say I have a 4-year-old daughter who is the light of my entire world. She's the reason I get up in the morning, the reason I do what I do. I mean, she is my entire world. I give thanks to the Lord every day that I can to her. Um I am currently right now I'm kind of transitioning a little bit. Um I grew up in the church with my grandparents. I would go occasionally with them. Um, but my family never really went to church regularly on Sundays. So, it was always kind of a little bit of my life, but it was never like a regular thing. Um, in this by no means, let me start this off by saying this in no means is a religious podcast. We're getting to know each other right now, so I'm telling you kind of where I'm at and who I am right now. So anyway, we it was a part of my life to some capacity. You know, we would go to church occasionally with them, or I would at least. And you know, I mean it was good. I had a good time. I learned a little bit. As a child, I learned enough to understand the basic principles of Christianity, of who Jesus was, of who God was, how the world was made, and you know, what being a Christian looked like. I didn't really know what being a Christian was and what it meant and how it affected me internally, but I knew what it was, and I was kind of just of the mindset that that was what you were supposed to be. I never gave it any second thought, to be honest. Um, so as I got a little bit older, as most kids and teenagers do, I rebelled a little bit and I stopped going to church with them on Sundays. Um, but it was around that same time that we had moved and our next door neighbors had two boys that ended up becoming two of my closest friends. We were next door neighbors, we did absolutely everything together. Well, the youngest son, whose name I won't say, um he would go to the youth group at the local church, or one of the local churches, on Wednesday nights. Well, it just so happened that as him and I got closer, he invited me to come with him. It also just so happened that the church he was going to this youth group at was the same Methodist, not the same church, but it was a Methodist church, just like the one my grandparents had taken me to when I was young. So, the customs, the way things work, how things are done, they were all about the same. So it was kind of, it was comfortable for me going into that knowing that, this is something I've experienced before. These are things I'm familiar with the way things are done here. Um so that was kind of I learned a little bit. I don't remember a whole lot, but it very quickly turned into a social gathering for me. That was where I went because my friends were there. Eric went. I'll have to edit that out. You know, I went with him, but other, people that I'd gone to school with were going, and it really turned into a social gathering. So I don't really recall that I learned a whole lot from that, but it was still some sort of church presence in my life. Um, and it was very shortly after that things in my life kind of took a turn, and things got very different. And I'm sure we'll talk later on about what those things were and how they affected me, but you know they got me questioning things. They were definitely negative impacts, and definitely I would say trauma building. But then that's neither here nor there. But the end thing is that it got me questioning. So right now, for the last, probably, we're in 2025, so probably the last 15 years, I've been more along the lines of agnostic than I have Christian. I didn't really know what agnostic was or what that meant until, probably the last 5, 6, 7 years. But I definitely fall in that category of not really understanding, not really knowing, that sort of thing. Um, and I know that's going to kind of lead to questions, because I know as I use my hands, people will see that I have a verse on my sleeve, and I'm sure, or a verse on my forearm, and I'm sure some people will see as well that I have a cross on my forearm or on my upper arm. I know that's going to kind of lead to questions, and we'll get to those at a later date as well. But right now, I'm finding myself in this position in my life where things are changing with me, not only health wise, but just like almost on a maturity level. I'm finding that all of the addictive things that I did in my life are kind of starting to subside. And I'm starting to find that, all of these things in social media that are, so dominant in relevancy, I'm kind of starting to rebel against. They're not appeasing me. I'm not as attracted to them as I once was. And I've noticed lately that I'm starting to lean back into becoming faithful again, which I haven't taken the full leap yet. I don't know if I can consider myself a full-blown Christian once again, but I found myself listening to Christian music, following the gospel. You know, um, I found myself reading my Bible more than I did in the past. I started listening to more Christian podcasts, and I do have to say that I think one of the biggest reasons for that, for the decision to make these changes and to start this process, was almost maybe politically motivated, which I know is going to sound weird, but hate it or love it, I'm a conservative Republican. I always have been, I probably always will be. And everything that's going on in the world has really kind of made me fall back into those feelings of being that. And I know he'll probably never see it. I know that it probably will never even get a second thought. But to be completely honest, one of the people that I've been seeing a lot of, that I've been watching a lot of and listening to a lot of, that really has kind of helped guide me into this conscious decision to better myself and to make these changes is Charlie Kirk. You know, he preaches the gospel on a day-to-day basis. He is a God-fearing, God-loving man, and you know, his views and my views and the way we see the world align up a lot. But the difference between him and I was that I was kind of leaning into more of the um stereotypical addictive male personalities. And I'm tired of it, you know. I don't feel good about it anymore, I guess is what I should say. There were things that I would do on a daily basis that when I would do them, you know, they would mess with me. They would start messing with me. You know, there were things that I would do on a daily basis that, you know, on the days that I did them, I would notice that the day after, I would just have a terrible day. But I started noticing that on the days that I didn't do those things, that I consciously maintained a healthier lifestyle, that I felt better. I was up earlier in the morning, I was moving in the morning. Like this morning, I got up and I walked a mile and a half. I was up at 6 o'clock in the morning, I had a cup of coffee, and then I got out and I started walking. Mind you, we're on cup of coffee number 3 now, but that's neither here nor there. And that's another thing that kind of goes along with this whole wrapped up thing is this idea of self reinvention is my health. I'm the biggest that I've ever been right now. I've always throughout my life maintained a larger structure, I think just because of the way I was built. No matter how active I was, I never really was athletic and toned. Um but I've always kind of maintained a structure right around 210, 230. And for a guy that's only 5'6", that's still morbidly obese. But there was a time in my life where I was taking a lot of drugs, I was in a really bad place, and I, you know, wasn't really eating a whole lot, and I did drop down to a lower weight. Granted, it wasn't in a healthy fashion, was not in a healthy fashion, and I do not recommend anybody do that. But I did drop down to that, you know, I think the lowest I ever got was about 190, somewhere between 190 and 200. And looking back at myself, yes, I did look very unhealthy, but just looking at the structure of my person, I looked like skin and bones, man. Absolute skin and bones. And looking back at that, I don't really know that I want to be that skinny just because of how poor it looked on me. So, bottom line is I need to lose weight, but I just don't know that I want to be that skinny. I'm 280 pounds right now. Over the course of the last, I think it's been 2 weeks now, I've been really consciously watching what I've been eating, watching my portions, watching what I've been taking on a daily basis, watching my calories, walking more, trying to get better sleep. I still kind of struggle with the sleep thing, but we're working on it. And I've noticed that I'm consciously feeling better. And I think those things are what also has motivated me to sit down and share my testimony and start this podcast. You know, this is kind of a testimony right now as to how I'm changing my life. Eventually, you know, the introduction podcast will be this testimony, but we'll move on to different topics down the road. Um and I mean, this isn't going to be for everybody. You know I've been all over the place. I'm scatterbrained. There's absolutely no structure to any of this, and I apologize for that. But this is kind of this is my place. This is my thing that I can do to get what's in here out. Whatever I'm thinking about, whatever it may be. And today for this introduction video, I wanted to sit down and I wanted to talk about the changes that I'm making and how good it feels. I'm not sponsored, nor do I ever expect to be. Black Rifle Coffee. Get you some. Um, so one of the things that I've been consciously thinking about as well, and that I've been actively thinking about, that I'm still unsure, is that where I am beginning to lean more into the traditional conservative lifestyle and, you know, trying to become more faithful and better myself, there's also certain parts of me that I feel like are a core part of who I am that I don't really know that I want to let go of. One of the things that Charlie has talked about, and I do believe they even brought it up as a topic of discussion when he did his podcast with Nala Ray, the former OnlyFans creator that has turned her life to God. I do believe they discussed it a little bit during their podcast. Um, but one of the things that I feel like you know, one of the things that I feel like I don't really know that I can change is my language. I do sometimes have foul language, but that almost comes as a part of who I am. I know that I'm never going to be this perfect Christian. I'll strive to be what God wants me to be, but I know that I'll never be perfect. And the way that I use my language, the way that I incorporate the foul language into comedy and into my daily lifestyle and my word structure, it's a part of my vocabulary I just don't know that I want to get rid of. And I know that's such a little thing to be, thinking about as much as I am. But, it's one of those things. It's like, if I dive into this faithful lifestyle and I make these changes to become this person that I think, that I'm confident that I want to be, is that something that I need to let go of? Or is that something that's okay to be there? And I just don't know. Um, So that's going to be something that I have to address down the road. And I don't really know that I have any other negative or addictive behaviors. I have some things personally that, that I'm dealing with that I don't know that I really want to talk about on the podcast. Um, but I'm not taking drugs. I'm not really drinking, really. Substance abuse is something I've struggled with in the past. And I would say not necessarily abuse, but substances are something that have been predominantly in my life right now. Um, I've got substances in this room that I'm not going to say that I shouldn't have because they're legal, but like, are these things that I need to let go? What is okay? What's not okay? Is it okay for me to use a substance to de-stress once in a while? Because it's not a daily thing, and it's not something that's necessarily hurting me either. But I don't know. Anyway, that's enough about that. Let's move on to some of the other things about me. Because of my work experience and because of my lifestyle and because of my family, I love cars. I love cars. I'm very particular about how I like my cars, but I love cars. And my niche that I fell into as far as cars is concerned is I love drag racing. I love drag racing. Pro street, pro mods, pro stock, top fuel, I love it. Absolutely love it. My TikTok feed right now is just drag racing everywhere. I love watching the stuff. Um I've been a drag racing fan for as far back as I can remember. Um I can think back to almost to over a decade ago, you know, sitting in the living room with my dad and my stepmom watching Street Outlaws. It's always been something that's intrigued me. It's always been something I've loved. It's a dream and a goal of mine to be able to build a drag car in some capacity, whether it be a pro mod, pro stock, pro street, whatever. It's a dream of mine to be able to build a drag car with somebody. And I don't mean buy parts and throw it together. I want to build the thing. I want to choose the block. I want to choose the parts. I want to I want to build it. I want to build the cage. I want to I want to build as much of it as I can. And I want to learn how to tune as well. I think that'd be another thing that'd be pretty interesting to do. Um, One of the big things that I watch right now is Cletus. I'm sure anybody in the car community knows Cletus McFarland is a huge inspiration for me. Um, the drag cars that he's got and the content motivated decisions that he makes to do with these cars, you know, what he does is impeccable. Impeccable. Um I mean, he's got, and the other thing too is he's got cars to appease everybody. You know, you've got James 240s, you've got Cletus and you've got Lumberjack and why can't I think of the other one? Lumberjack and Mullet for the El Camino guys. You've got Leroy and Ruby for the Corvette people. You've got Eagle for the Pro Mod guys. Like, there's just, you've got McFlurry for the Fox Body guys. Like, you've got a little bit of everything on that channel. And I love that. And I love that he is breaking into other forms of motorsports as well. Like, he just did a video here about a week or so ago of him doing the I don't know what it's called. I don't know much about it, but it's like the jet boat racing. I thought that was sweet. I loved that. And the aviation stuff that he's been doing. I think it'll, in the NASCAR stuff too. Cletus McFarland has brought NASCAR back. Hands down. I was a fan of NASCAR for most of my life, never really followed it, but I always had a soft spot in my heart for it. But I think Cletus McFarland has really brought NASCAR back to the main stage. Um, and I really think it won't be too long before he dives into things along the lines of like motocross and other motorsports like that. Rally racing, doing the types of things that Travis Pastrana does. Because I know Travis Pastrana and Lily Block are both friends of his. They've both been to the Freedom 500. So I think it's only a matter of time before that starts to happen and he starts to dive into that. But he's got so much going on right now. It's hard to juggle everything that he's doing, from the NASCAR to the drag racing to the boat racing. It's hard to juggle those things. Um but anyway, for anybody that gives a any sort of a shit, um my absolute favorite cars are, in order, a 1969 Chevy Nova. First year they dropped the Nova 2 logo. An SN95, for those who don't know, is a new Edge Mustang, like a 99 to '04 style Ford Mustang, and a 2003 Nissan Skyline. I'm not a big foreign guy. I've never been a big foreign guy. I like domestic, but long before Fast and Furious was even a thing in my life and I even knew what it was, I had this little Hot Wheels car. And I don't know if I still have it. I'd have to look around for it. But it was a black and gold Hot Wheels car. And it was a Nissan Skyline. And it was my absolute favorite. I had hundreds of Hot Wheels. That one was my favorite Hot Wheels. And I ended up getting another one that was a different color scheme, that was kind of a grayish color with some red in it. And it was the same car, just a different color scheme. Those two cars were my absolute favorites. I wish I knew where those Hot Wheels were, actually, because I haven't seen those in a long time. So there's my stint about drag racing. What else do we want to know about me? Um, I like weapons. I really like weapons, as you can probably tell from the background behind me. Um, I've got a small gun collection, but you know, I'm a gun collector, I guess you could say. Um, I've got my wall of weapons behind me, which will eventually end up growing. The wall behind me is unfinished, and I'm going. Eventually, this wall is going to end up completely changing, and it's going to look totally different. Um, I'm just going to fill it with weapons. So, just kind of a little breakdown, just in case anybody's curious. Here it is. The shotgun that's here. That is a family heirloom. That's why it's on the wall. It is a 16 gauge. I wrote it down somewhere. I'd have to look it up because I do not remember the brand name. But it's a 16 gauge shotgun that my great grandfather bought new, handed down to my grandfather, who then handed it to me. Um, I don't remember what the name of it was, but I know that after I got that, we were able to pull the serial number off of it, to which I took to a local expert, and we were able to find out that that shotgun was manufactured in 1862, around the Civil War time. So I decided that that'd be a good thing to hang on the wall. You know, it may not be valuable, it may not mean anything to anybody, but it means something to me. And I'm sitting here staring at it in the computer screen just because it makes me smile. Um, so this little guy here, that was a sword that I had gotten from a friend of mine, and it was beaten and it was mangled and it was torn up and it was in really bad shape. And I was able to kind of rehabilitate it. It's not sharp by any means because I never planned on using it for anything that it would need to be sharp for. Um, but I was able to rehabilitate it and make it look good again. And I decided to go. It's on this side. I decided to go with red parts on the handle. It's kind of got a robotic kind of multi-piece handle. It looks really cool. Um, so I decided that'd be a good nice piece to hang on the wall as well. And then the sword over here behind me on my right. Some of you may recognize that sword, some of you may not recognize that sword. A funny story about that sword is that when I was at the local gun shop and military surplus store, they've got a selection of swords to choose from, and I saw that sword. And I was looking at it and it was catching my eye and I really liked it. I liked the way it looked. I liked the leather kind of coming down on the blade. It was just a really cool sword. And I had called the guy over and I asked him if I could see the sword. He gave it to me. I was sitting there looking at it. The price was good. I looked at the tag and the tag said William Wallace sword. That was all it said. And in my head, I was like, William Wallace? I know that name. Why do I know that name? But it never clicked to me. I ended up buying the sword. I bring it home, mount it up on the wall there as I'm mounting all my other stuff, mounted on the wall, really happy with it. And it wasn't for probably another 3 or 4 months after that. I just happened to be doing stuff on my computer. And I was going through and I was looking at some things or whatever. And and a screenshot or not, or like a picture of a movie poster from the movie Braveheart with Mel Gibson. You know, I scrolled by it. And I just scrolled by. I didn't think anything about it, and it occurred to me a few seconds later that that sword looked kind of that he was holding kind of looked familiar. So I scrolled back up and I looked at this picture, and it's this picture of him holding this sword. And I'm sitting there staring at that sword, and I'm like, why do I recognize that sword? And then a couple more seconds later, it clicked to me. I've got that sword right there. That he's William Wallace in the movie. And then it all kind of came together and clicked. So it's just funny to me that I bought that sword not really understanding and not knowing what it was until many, many months later when a poster popped up on my screen and it clicked. That's just a funny little story there that I like. Um, and I've got plenty of other weapons too. I keep, personal protection is a big thing for me. So, I mean, I've got guns scattered all throughout the house. I mean, hell, I've got one sitting right here. This is a custom built 1911. It was built in I'd have to pull the paperwork out because I've got the paperwork from when it was built. I want to say it was built in 1962, maybe. Maybe. I don't really remember. And yes, it is loaded. I'm not one of those people that keeps guns unloaded in the house when there's kids. Fuck that. Pardon my language. As long as you know gun safety, and as far as I'm concerned, as long as you teach your kids gun safety and you keep them in a place where they can't get to them when you're not around, I think you're fine to keep guns loaded in the house. All of my handguns are loaded. I've got one in here. I've got one in the main room. I keep one by my bedside. I keep a shotgun in my bedroom as well. It's just a bunch of mumbo jumbo. As long as you know how to parent correctly and you know what to do and when to do it, you don't ever have to worry about your kids getting into the things that they shouldn't get into. And I'm a firm believer in that. If you can't keep your gun loaded in the house because, oh, my kid'll get into it and possibly shoot me or shoot himself, then you aren't parenting right. Multiple times I can account for this, that I will be cleaning one of my guns or tinkering with something. Granted, they are unloaded at the time because I'm messing with them and I'm doing things with them. And I've done this on occasion to prove to the people that have been there with me that I'm not joking. I'll be doing something with it and my daughter will be sitting next to me on, at the kitchen counter, and I'll just stop what I'm doing and hand her the gun. And she'll sit there and she'll look at it for a second and she'll look up at me kind of dumbfounded and she'll look at it for a second and she'll either just ignore it or she'll just say, I don't want it. Only one time have I ever handed her that gun and said, hold this. And I taught her where to put her finger. I taught her how to hold it. I taught her where to point it. I taught her what to do, what not to do. And now, anytime I'm doing anything with my guns, I always make it a point whenever they're unloaded and I'm doing stuff with them to hand her the gun, just so she grabs that, keeps her finger off the trigger, points it in a safe direction, just to try to make it muscle memory for her. And I think only one time have I ever had to correct her from holding it wrong or pointing it the wrong direction. I don't even remember what it was because I've only had to do it once. She's 4 years old. I'm starting her young. And to anybody that says I'm a bad dad because of that, go fuck yourself. You're obviously doing something wrong. Um, so we've really kind of gone around the block here. We've talked about a lot of different things. Um, so the structure behind this podcast for future, um, I'm still trying to determine what I want to include in here, what I don't want to include in here. Um, Politics and public relations are something that, I have strong views on, but I don't know if it's something that I really want to talk about, considering how touchy people can be in the world. You know, I don't necessarily want to be coming in here and just pissing people off for no reason. Obviously my views are my views. I just told probably a few people to go fuck themselves about the kid thing. Um, but I just don't know if I want to dive into the topics that I know are surefire going to piss a lot of people off, because I do have some views that I know will do that. So I don't know. Maybe we'll dive into them. Maybe we won't. But this podcast is primarily just going to kind of be, me talking about my journey in faithfulness and my journey back to Christianity. Talking about cars, talking about guns, talking about weapons, my things, and all of my different things in life. You know, I may bring some guests on. I may, interview some people. We may have some conversations with some of my friends. Other people. We'll just have to kind of see where this goes and how it plays out. Um, but and we'll probably talk about some things going on in the world. It's a really, really rough time in the world right now, and the future is so unpredictable, especially with everything going on in Iran. And I mean, we're gonna have to just wait to see what Iran does, and see how our president decides to handle the situation. I mean, we're closer than we've ever been right now to World War III, but at the same time, we can still have hope that conflict doesn't escalate. So we'll just have to see how it plays out. But we'll talk about all kinds of different things. If there's anything that any of you guys want to hear me talk about, please don't hesitate to drop a comment down below. Ask me questions. You know, whatever you feel like doing. I'm an open book. I'll talk about just about anything. Um, and yeah, that's all I've got. I don't really have any sort of time frame on this either. This is just kind of a pilot just to kind of get my introduction out there. The next podcast will probably be a lot more structured. This is kind of just my wild, harebrained introduction of me to all of you. So, the bouncing around that we did and all the different topics and everything that we talked about, that's kind of just a little insight into me and how my brain works and how I think about things. It's very easy for me to be going on this topic and then relate something to this topic and then immediately branch over and start talking about this topic. So, it's just the way my brain works, unfortunately. So, I appreciate you guys, whoever has made it this long into the podcast. I appreciate you. We go live on TikTok and Twitch weekly. I go live on TikTok more than I do Twitch, but make sure you guys tune into those. You never know what I'm doing. A lot of times you can find me, sitting in my recliner out in the living room listening to music, watching YouTube, streaming some Warzone, Forza, whatever I might be playing. Sometimes you might just catch me with a razor on my head singing to myself. You never know what you're going to find. So make sure you go give me a follow on all my other social medias as well. It's Mr. Tree Stump across all platforms. So make sure you drop a follow. Stay tuned in. I really hope and I really am going to try to make this podcast go somewhere. This is something I've wanted to do for a long time, like I said. So for those of you that have made it this far into the podcast, please drop a like down below, drop a comment, let me know what you think, let me know what you know, let me know what you think. You know, subscribe, ring the bell, go follow me on all my other social medias. I appreciate you guys. I hope you have a wonderful day. This has been the pilot episode, episode 1 of the Stumpcast. My name is Mr. Tree Stump. I hope you have a lovely day. Mr. Tree Stump out.